I found the recipe card in my mother's wooden recipe box, between meatloaf and lemon bars, and for a few seconds I thought nothing of it. The card was stained with gravy and brown along one corner. Across the top, in my mother's neat blue handwriting, she had written Sunday Chicken and Biscuits. She made it for birthdays, after funerals, and whenever somebody in our family had reached a point where ordinary conversation felt like work. Then I noticed the corrections. Less broth, more sage. Bake uncovered last 20 minutes. Those words were written in green ink by Ruth Calder. I knew Ruth's handwriting because she had lived next door to us in Des Moines for almost 30 years. She and my mother, Helen, were best friends until 2003, when they had a falling out so bitter that my mother refused to say Ruth's name afterward. At least, that was the story I had believed. The corrections on the card were clearly newer. Beside them, Ruth had written one short note. Make extra. Mark stays if there are leftovers. I am Mark Ellison. I was 67 when I found that card, retired from maintaining bowling alley equipment throughout central Iowa. I spent most of my life crawling behind pin setters, cleaning belts, resetting switches, and fixing machines that could look perfectly normal while one bent linkage quietly threw everything out of sequence. The note bothered me because I knew when it had been written. For years after my mother and Ruth supposedly stopped speaking, I ate Sunday chicken and biscuits at my mother's house almost every week. That was during the worst period of my marriage. My wife, Karen, and I had separated for nearly 5 months. I remembered those dinners as something my mother did for me. But Ruth's handwriting suggested she had been there too. The card had a small round pinhole near the burn corner, blackened around the edge as if it had once been hung too close to a stove. I touched it with my thumb. Then I read Ruth's note again. Make extra. Mark stays if there are leftovers. Someone I believed had vanished from our family had apparently known exactly how long I stayed at my mother's table. Ruth had been part of my childhood before I understood adults could stop being friends. Her husband died young. My father traveled for farm equipment sales, so Ruth and my mother spent countless evenings together. They canned tomatoes, traded books, and argued over recipes as if salt were a moral issue. Ruth's handwriting appeared in old birthday cards and church cookbooks all through our house. Then, suddenly it stopped. The break came when I was 46. That was also the year my marriage started coming apart. I worked for a company that serviced bowling centers across Iowa and Nebraska. In the spring of 2003, a mechanic named Toby Lane was injured while working on a pin setter in Omaha. He survived, but his right hand was badly damaged. I had trained him. I had also shown him a shortcut for clearing a jam that our manual specifically warned against. He used it after I had left the building. Nobody blamed me officially. I blamed myself enough for everyone. I became quiet first, then irritable. I slept badly and worked every extra call offered to me. When Karen asked what was wrong, I told her nothing. When she asked again, I told her to stop interrogating me. Our son, Evan, was 16. He stopped bringing friends home. One night, Karen told me she and Evan were staying with her sister for a while. I remember my mother being furious. Not at me, at Ruth. According to Mom, Ruth had encouraged Karen to leave. She had no right. My mother told me. Ruth and Karen were friendly, but I never knew they were close. Within days, Mom said she had told Ruth to stay out of our lives. I believed her. It mattered to me then. My wife had left. My son barely spoke to me. Knowing my mother had chosen my side gave me one place where I did not feel entirely at fault. Every Sunday, I went to her house. She made chicken and biscuits. Sometimes I stayed an hour, sometimes 3. Now, staring at Ruth's green handwriting, I started wondering whether she had been helping prepare those meals after all. I called my older sister, Nancy. When I mentioned the card, she went silent. Then she said, "You found the green writing." Not what writing. The green writing. I asked, "When did Mom start talking to Ruth again?" Nancy replied, "That depends on what you mean by talking." Nancy lived outside Ames and agreed to meet me the next day. I brought the recipe card in a plastic sleeve. She looked at the burned corner first. "I haven't seen that in years." "So you knew about it?" "Yes." "Why didn't I?" She gave me a tired look. Because it wasn't about you. That irritated me more than it should have. The card had my name on it. Nancy explained that after Mom died, she helped clear the kitchen. The recipe box came to me because I was the one who cared about the old family dishes. Did Mom and Ruth reconcile? Sort of. What does sort of mean? They started seeing each other again. That was the answer I expected and still did not enjoy hearing. How long after the argument? Nancy looked down. A few weeks. I stared at her. For nearly 20 years, I had believed their friendship ended permanently. Nancy remembered Ruth coming through Mom's back door on Tuesday afternoons. Never when I was expected. They cooked together. Sometimes they went grocery shopping. Once Nancy walked in and found them laughing over a ruined pie. Did Mom tell you to keep it from me? Yes. Why? She said you had enough going on. That sounded convenient. Nancy gave me Ruth's current telephone number. She was 81 and living in a retirement community in West Des Moines. Before I called her, I went through the rest of the recipe box. Several cards had Ruth's handwriting, but only older ones from the 80s and 90s. The chicken card was different. The original recipe called for thyme. Ruth crossed it out and wrote sage. My mother had always used sage when I was a kid. Karen used thyme. That detail bothered me because during our separation, the dish tasted exactly like childhood. I had told Mom that once. This is how it used to taste. She smiled and said she had finally remembered the old way. Now I knew Ruth had corrected it. At the bottom of the card, almost hidden beneath a grease stain, was another green note. Thursday 1st. Sunday if he comes. I read it several times. Thursday had been the night Karen, and Evan usually ate dinner at my mother's house. I had never known that. Suddenly, the weekly meal I remembered as my refuge looked less private than I had believed. Ruth answered my call herself. Her voice was older, but I recognized immediately. Mark Ellison. You knew it was me? Nancy warned me. I almost laughed. Apparently, everybody gets warned except me. That was sometimes a problem. She agreed to see me. Her apartment was bright and small, with watercolor paintings on the walls and a bowl of peppermint candies beside the couch. I put the recipe card on her dining table. She smiled when she saw it. Helen kept it. She kept your handwriting. Those aren't the same thing. I asked about the green notes. Ruth said she and Mom cooked the dish together many times during my separation. Thursday first meant they made it for Karen and Evan on Thursdays. Sunday, if he comes, meant they made another pan for me if Mom thought I would visit. I felt heat rise in my face. So my mother was feeding both sides. Ruth's eyes sharpened. There weren't sides, Mark. It felt like there were. I know. I asked whether Karen knew Ruth had resumed seeing Mom. Yes. Evan? Yes. So I was the only one excluded. Ruth did not argue. That made it worse. She explained that Karen did not want Evan forced to choose between us. My mother's house became neutral ground. Karen could eat there on Thursday. I could come Sunday. Evan sometimes came both nights. I remembered him showing up at Mom's house once or twice during that period. I thought he came because he missed his grandmother. Maybe he did, but someone had created a place where he could see me without having to announce that he wanted to. Was that your idea? I asked. Partly. My mother's. Partly. Karen's. Ruth looked at me. Mostly Evan's. That stopped me. My 16-year-old son had apparently been involved in planning around a father who believed everyone else was deciding his life. I asked why Mom and Ruth kept pretending to hate each other. Ruth looked toward the kitchen. We didn't pretend at first. What does that mean? It means the fight was real. Then she said, you just never knew what it was actually about. I had always believed Ruth and Mom fought because Ruth encouraged Karen to leave me. That was not true. Ruth did encourage Karen to leave temporarily, but my mother had done it first. The words landed slowly. My mother told Karen to take Evan and leave? Ruth nodded. After you threw the dinner plate. I remembered the plate. I had forgotten who saw it. Karen and I were arguing in our kitchen. She told me Toby's accident was not a reason to punish everyone around me. I swept my arm across the counter. A plate hit the floor. It did not hit Karen. That distinction had been important to me for years. Mom had been standing in the hallway. Afterward, she drove Karen and Evan to Karen's sister's house. She came back and told me Ruth talked Karen into leaving. I know. Why? Ruth folded her hands. Because you needed somebody who hadn't left you. That was the first truth that changed the whole shape of those months. Mom had not defended me against Ruth. She had helped create the separation. Then she let me believe Ruth was responsible. Ruth agreed to carry the blame because she believed I would still listen to my mother if I thought Mom was on my side. I stood up from the table. You both manipulated me. Yes. Ruth's answer was immediate. No excuse. Would you prefer one? I did not. She told me Mom called her the morning after Karen left. They had already been angry with each other over how to handle me. Ruth thought Mom protected me too much. Mom thought Ruth judged me without understanding how badly Toby's accident had affected me. Then the plate broke. Mom changed her mind. They agreed on one thing. I needed help, but I would reject it if it sounded like punishment. So Mom became the safe person. Ruth became the person I could blame. The Thursday and Sunday meals came later. They were not designed to trick Karen back into my house. They were designed to keep Evan from losing either parent, while Karen and I figured out whether our marriage could survive. I looked down at the recipe card. Make extra. Mark stays if there are leftovers. For years, I had read my mother's dinners as proof she believed I was right. Instead, she had been keeping me at the table long enough for my son to sometimes walk through the door. I left Ruth's apartment angry enough that I did not call anyone for several days. The story was compassionate when told from a distance. From inside it, I felt managed. I went through an old calendar from 2003. There were Sundays when Evan's name appeared in my handwriting. Evan came by, watch game. Evan helped Mom with garage. Took Evan home. I had remembered those visits as random. They were the beginning of my relationship with him, recovering. I called Evan. He was 39 now, married, with 2 children, and a roofing business in Cedar Rapids. I was wondering when Grandma's recipe card would catch up with us, he said. I rubbed my forehead. You knew too. I was 16, Dad. I knew pieces. He told me Thursday dinners were his idea because he missed my mother and did not want Karen hearing every conversation he had with me. On Sundays, he sometimes asked Grandma whether I was there before deciding to come over. Were you afraid of me? Evan was quiet. Sometimes. That was hard to hear. Because I threw a plate? Because nobody knew which dad was coming home. Quiet dad or angry dad. I did not defend myself. After Toby's injury, I had turned guilt into a private possession. Anyone who tried to touch it got pushed away. I asked whether the dinners helped. Yeah. How? You were different at Grandma's. What does that mean? You didn't yell there. The simplicity of that nearly broke me. My mother's table had been a place where I still knew how to behave like myself. Ruth and Mom understood that before I did. Evan told me that after several Sunday meals, he began asking me questions about work again. That led to me finally telling him about Toby. Then Karen agreed to meet me for coffee. Months later, I moved home. I had always remembered that recovery as something I initiated after finally deciding to get counseling. That was partly true. But before counseling, there had been dinners. Before the dinners, there had been 2 women I believe were enemies quietly making the same chicken dish in my mother's kitchen. I still felt betrayed, but the betrayal no longer looked simple. Then Evan asked, "Did you find the burn mark?" I looked at the blackened corner of the card. The little one? Grandma did that the night Ruth came back. Evan remembered because he was there. It happened on a Thursday. Mom had invited Karen and Evan for dinner. Ruth came over carrying groceries. Evan had never seen the 2 women together since their argument. While they cooked, Mom pinned the recipe card to a cork strip above the stove. The card slipped. One corner touched the edge of a hot burner. Ruth grabbed it before it caught fire. That's all. I asked. No. Evan hesitated. Grandma started crying. Not because of the card. Because Ruth had said she could not keep being the villain forever. Mom told her, just until Mark can stand on his own feet. Ruth replied, and then what? Mom did not answer. That question remained between them for years. I went back to Ruth. She seemed surprised to see me so soon. I asked why she never demanded that Mom tell me the truth after Karen, and I reconciled. I did. And Helen said not yet. For how long? A long time. That answer disturbed me. The separation ended. I got counseling. I stopped drinking for several years because alcohol made my anger too easy. Toby and I eventually spoke. He never blamed me as much as I blamed myself. So why maintain the lie? Ruth opened a drawer and removed an old community cookbook. Inside were two versions of Sunday Chicken and Biscuits. One was Mom's. The other was Ruth's. Ruth's version used thyme. Mom's used sage. They had argued about it for decades. After they secretly resumed cooking together, they combined the recipes. That's why all the corrections are on Helen's card, Ruth said. Why didn't she copy it clean? She said it tasted better with the argument still visible. That sounded exactly like my mother. Then Ruth showed me something written on the back of her own card. Helen says Mark asked why we stopped speaking. I told her I can keep carrying it if she still needs me to. I asked, needed you to carry what? Ruth met my eyes. Not your blame. Then she told me there had been one more person Mom was protecting. Karen. Karen and I stayed married until she died 7 years ago. I had always believed she left in 2003 because Ruth and Mom convinced her she was unsafe with me. The full truth was harder. Karen had wanted to leave months earlier. She stayed because my mother asked her to wait until after Toby's surgeries were over. Mom believed I was close to falling apart. Karen resented her for that. By the night I threw the plate, she had already spent months protecting me at the cost of her own peace. When Mom finally told her to leave, she apologized. Not to me, to Karen. Ruth knew all of it. That was why their original argument had become so ugly. Ruth believed Mom had asked too much of Karen. Mom knew she had. After our marriage recovered, Mom wanted to tell me everything. Karen begged her not to. She didn't want you staying married out of guilt. Ruth said. I stared at her. Karen feared that if I learned she had delayed leaving for my mother's sake, then returned partly because Evan needed stability, I would spend the rest of our marriage wondering whether she actually chose me. So the public feud remained useful. Ruth stayed the woman who had supposedly pushed Karen away. Mom remained the mother who had defended me. Karen and I were allowed to rebuild without me measuring every good year against how our separation began. That was the second truth. The lie had not survived because my mother needed to look loyal. It survived because Karen asked her to protect the dignity of the marriage we were trying to rebuild. Ruth agreed, even though it meant I disliked her for years. Mom agreed, even though she carried guilt for asking Karen to stay too long in the first place. Nobody's choice was completely clean. Karen should have trusted me. Mom should not have decided what truths I could handle. Ruth sometimes enjoyed being the person willing to say what everyone else avoided. And I had given all three of them reasons to fear what I would do with shame. Before I left, Ruth touched the burned corner of the card. Helen kept this because of that mark. The burn? She said it reminded her of the night we stopped trying to make things look untouched. For the first time, the damage on the card did not look accidental. I made Sunday chicken and biscuits for Evan's family that winter. I had not cooked it myself in years. My granddaughter, Sophie, stood beside me at the counter reading the old card aloud. Why does one person say thyme and another say sage? Family disagreement. Who won? Nobody. She considered that. So, which one are we using? Both. That made her laugh. I followed Mom's measurements where they still made sense and Ruth's corrections where experience had improved them. I used less broth, more sage, a little thyme. I baked it uncovered for the last 20 minutes. And I made extra. Evan noticed a note. Mark stays if there are leftovers. He smiled. You always did. I thought your grandmother just liked feeding me. She did. That was the thing I had finally learned to stop doing, replacing one truth with another. Mom fed me because she loved me. She also used those meals to keep me somewhere safe long enough for my son to approach me. Ruth accepted my anger because she believed my mother's relationship with me mattered more than her reputation. Karen came home for reasons that were mixed at first. Then she stayed for years after those first reasons no longer mattered. I wish they had told me. I will probably always wish that. Understanding their silence does not make every part of it right. It simply makes it human. The recipe card is in my kitchen now. I did not clean it. The grease stains remain. Ruth's green corrections cross through Mom's blue handwriting. The little pinhole is still near the top, and one corner is burned black. When Sophie asked why I did not copy the recipe onto a clean card, I almost gave her an easy answer. Instead, I told her, because this is the recipe, not just the ingredients. The corrections, too. The places where somebody changed her mind. The parts one person did differently from another. The small damage left from a night when two stubborn women stood in the same kitchen again after everyone believed they never would. After dinner, I put the card back in its wooden box, but I left the lid open. There did not seem to be much reason anymore to keep it closed.